In Ecuador, police violently repressed protesters in Quito as nationwide protests against the recently announced austerity measures intensify. The death toll climbs to 27 in Iraq as anti-government protests continue across the country. And the Prime Minister of the Bahamas announces the death toll from Hurricane Dorian has risen.
Now at 60.
Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno has declared a state of exception as thousands of people across the country are protesting against the austerity measures imposed by the government. Fiery protests erupted in the capital Quito and spread like wildfire throughout other cities after transport unions called for a nationwide strike over fuel subsidy cuts. Protesters blocked roads and burned tires. Groups of protesters trying to reach the government palace in downtown Quito were met with police repression. Heavily armed troops fired tear gas at the demonstrators and journalists, sending them scampering. As the fuel measure came into effect, bus stations were also closed. As the strike left several cities' transport system paralyzed while many schools were closed. Earlier this week, the president announced a series of pro-IMF neoliberal measures, including tax reforms. These measures have been implemented just ahead of the next $4.2 billion IMF loan disbursement. Meanwhile, Ecuador's Interior Minister Maria Paula Romo has confirmed that over a dozen people have been detained for protesting against the austerity measures imposed by Moreno.
We can confirm that 19 people have been detained. Interrupting traffic is a crime and will be treated as such. Suspending public services is also a crime and will be treated as such. Attacking police services is a crime and will be treated as such. These decisions are hard but necessary for the benefit of the country. In light of this, President Lenin Moreno has declared a state of exception.
I'm here to stand against Lenin Moreno's economic measures. They're designed to make the poor poorer and make the rich richer. He's removing state subsidies for regular fuel and diesel, which only make things more expensive, from medicine to food. Having a state subsidy is not privilege. It is a right that we deserve because for decades, government have used our fuel sources for their own corruption and their own gain. The labour reform they're trying to pass is a result of these economic measures. It will only cause greater instability among the workforce as the youth will be further exploited and employees will see their salaries reduced.
In the capital Quito, riot police have violently repressed protesters, firing tear gas at the crowds, including journalists in the historic center. Our correspondent Denise Herrera is on the ground in Quito. Denise.
As you can see, police repression continues here in the streets of the historic center of Quito. We see students running away from tear gas. And here, right behind me, as you can see, there is a clash between protesters and police. Students are trying to continue marching to the presidential palace, but as you can see, motorcycle police officers have been deployed. Police officers are holding batons and they are chasing students and other protesters down the street.
And as protests intensify in Ecuador, the Minister of the Economy has announced that 10,000 more public sector workers will be laid off before the end of the year.
We will provide more details later, but nearly 10,000 workers will be laid off before the year's end, which is part of our restructuring of various ministries. This is a process to optimize and make governmental bodies more efficient.
Moving on, social organizations that support the Bolivian government have warned of an opposition campaign to discredit the electoral process and question the results of the October 20th elections.
Social organizations have long supported the government's plans and have backed President Evo Morales' re-election campaign. However, the state efforts are underway to interfere with the process.
We have to guarantee free and fair elections and defend the electoral process from actions that seek to destabilise it at a national and international level, with false surveys and allegations of supposed fraud that they've never been able to prove.
After calls for protests to pressure Evo Morales to resign failed, and the Supreme Electoral Court restricted the dissemination of public opinion poll, two conflicts remain. Doctors have been on strike for more than 40 days, and social leaders of Potus who oppose the exploitation of lithium are also protesting.
We can't let them confuse us. We are free to exercise our democratic right. We are also in charge of safeguarding social and democratic stability of the country for all Bolivians.
The movement towards socialism continues its arduous work as various polls place President Evo Morales in the lead for re-election.
We're always campaigning as if we were in last place to guarantee the objectives we've set for ourselves. We are not vain. We are accepting our work with total humility.
But the opposition continues to criticize the Supreme Electoral Court after calls for the resignation of all its members failed. Now they insist there will be an alleged electoral fraud.
This is a topic that's created by the media and has gotten more complex due to several factors. I think political confrontation has always been a hallmark of our country's electoral process. There is no electoral process in which this confrontation, this controversy, has not existed.
Bolivia will have general elections on October 20th, and the Electoral Court has announced that for the first time, the electoral roll will be audited by the Organization of American States, which was one of the demands of the opposition.
The Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has arrived in Cuba for an official visit. The Prime Minister was greeted in Havana by Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez. Following his arrival, he laid a wreath of flowers in José Martí's grave, paying honors to the apostle of the Cuban independence. The official welcome ceremony is being held at the presidential palace, where Medvedev will then meet with the President Miguel Díaz-Canel. The purpose of this visit is to sign numerous cooperation agreements between both nations. Judicial workers in Colombia decided to start a 48-hour strike on Wednesday. For his part, the executive secretary of the union coordinator of the judicial branch announced that a 48-hour strike will be held at the courts and prosecutor's office in the 32 departments across the country. More than 55 judicial officials have suspended their activities in the country. The union leader stated that they are concerned about the overcrowding workers experience in the country's courts. He further noted that the commitments made in the strike 2 months ago have not been enacted, increasing uneasiness among officials. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, has said that the country will continue to strengthen the defensive partnership between Cuba and the Bolivarian Republic.
My Chief General, Vladimir Padrino López, is working to continue our military and intelligence cooperation with Cuba in order to strengthen Venezuela's capacity for defense and the defense of Cuba. We will continue cooperating economically because, in the end, as you said, we love our brave union and we will be victorious, together Cuba and Venezuela.
The Brazilian Supreme Court decided to accept a decision which could mean the revision of dozens of sentences from the Lava Jato operation. With 7 votes in favor and 4 against, the decision may cause the reversal of 143 sentences out of the 162. Among those is that of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir, has the details.
In Brasilia tonight, the Supreme Court just upheld a decision from the second working group from last Wednesday, which, if it's carried through properly, will end up reversing around 70% of the convictions in the now disgraced Lava Jato investigation, which was overseen by the current Justice Minister, former Judge Sergio Moro, who's been revealed through The Intercept, through these leaked Telegram conversations, to have collaborated illegally with prosecution to put the former President Lula in jail, even though they knew they had no evidence against him. This ruling by the Supreme Court means that in cases where plea bargain testimony was coerced, where they arrested businessmen and then only let them out of jail after they changed their testimony, which appears to be the case in around 70% of the Lava Jato convictions, the defendant has to have the right to the final word of defense. And this wasn't respected in many of the cases, including Lula's second conviction over the Itaibaya vacation property. So, although it doesn't have direct effect on Lula getting out of jail, for example, soon in the near future, it's just one more thing that's discrediting the entire Lava Jato investigation. As pressure builds from all over the world to free Lula, it's just one more chink in this defense of this investigation that's basically now been proven to be indefensible.
We thank Brian Meir for that report. We'll take a short break now, but when we return, weeks after Hurricane Dorian, the death toll in the Bahamas has risen to 60. Don't go away.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en ahí.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Thousands of protesters gathered in May 5th Square in Mexico on Wednesday to commemorate the 51 years since the Tlatelolco massacre. On October 2nd, hundreds of students, protesters, and passerbyers were killed by military and police forces who opened fire on the almost 10,000 strong march. Students, social leaders, and survivors participated in an event across Mexico City in remembrance of the massacre. During this protest, there were some moments of tension between the police and demonstrators, but no major incidents occurred.
Exactly. There's impunity which is covering up this crime, and many others that previous governments had committed. And we're seeing that they're calling this a transformation. But the new armed force has been created, the National Guard, and it's made out of people from the armed forces that haven't been tried for the crimes they've committed.
As survivors, we have the duty to ensure that this is remembered, and with that, we keep the memory alive. It's not just because we were victims. The people themselves were the victims. We don't know how many died, but we know it was an act of genocide.
Dengue outbreaks are spreading across the globe thanks to a perfect storm of climate change. Honduras has by far the highest state rate from the mosquito-borne illness in Latin America. So far for 2019, the country has recorded 144 dengue deaths.
It's the worst epidemic of the disease the country has ever experienced, with an estimated 81,000 cases of severe dengue reported, and that's only so far for the year. Of the more than 140 dengue deaths, nearly two-thirds are children under the age of 10.
I was there with him, unable to sleep because he himself can't sleep, since his blood would flow out if he leans on his back. Also, when he sneezes, blood clots come out of his nose.
The dengue fever cases are expected to increase due to the onset of the rainy season.
We're talking about 1,377 dengue cases so far this year. It's the children who are always the most adversely affected.
Some in the medical sector believe the situation could have been brought under control since the beginning of this year, but technical personnel were isolated, and they say privatization of some hospitals made matters worse.
The death toll from this disease that can be controlled, yet we see that is climbing. Let's remember that back in 2018, there were a little more than 5,000 cases. This year alone, we already have more than 81,000 cases. The death toll is alarming.
Public hospitals in Honduras are overflowing with the enormous dengue caseloads. There are over 100,000 patients, and each hospital has an average of 78 beds alone. Affected families are turning to a higher authority as they keep hope alive for their sick loved ones.
I feel so distressed for my son because he's lost a lot of blood, but we have to have faith in God because he's the one who helps us.
Honduras' public health system has been ailing for some time. There have been reports that only half of the 31 hospitals around the country are actually fully functioning. However, Governor Juan Hernandez defended the integrity of those institutions.
We have invested in an all-inclusive, equitable, high-quality, fair, and decent health system. It's no easy work. We are struggling, but still pushing ahead.
Most of the country's dengue fever-related deaths have been recorded in the north, where a permanent state of emergency has been declared.
It's been a month since Category 5 Hurricane Dorian ravaged the Bahamas, and the death toll has risen to 60. This was revealed by Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, who also noted that more than 400 people are missing. He made the announcement at the reopening of Parliament on Wednesday, as he noted millions will be spent on restoration.
The official number of deaths is now at 60. And there are approximately 424 people missing. Speaker, I ask, maybe bow our heads for a moment. Remember those who have lost their lives. I wish to advise the House of the preliminary estimate of how these funds are going to be spent. I note that these estimates are subject to adjustments and further refinement. The proposed use of the funds are as follows. Electricity restoration, $30 million. Water restoration, $15 million. Enhanced social welfare spending, $30 million. Debris removal and cleanup, $15 million. Reimbursement of evacuation and shelter costs, $1 million. Unallocated funds, $9 million.
The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, or OECS, has expressed mixed emotions surrounding the verdict given to Amber Geiger, the U.S. cop sentenced to 10 years for murdering St. Lucia national Botham Jean a year ago. OECS Director General Dr. Didacus Jules says he acknowledged the sliver of justice, but adds that the region continues to mourn with Botham's family the loss of a promising son of our soil. Social media has been abuzz with discussion after Botham Jean's brother, Brant, hugged the officer that killed him. Brant told the Texas cop he wished her no ill, as he testified to how his brother's death impacted the family on Wednesday. South Africa and Nigeria have signed 30 trade and cooperation agreements and also agreed to set up mechanisms to prevent violence targeting foreigners. The agreements were made during a state visit to South Africa by Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. They also come weeks after a wave of xenophobic attacks in and around Johannesburg strained relations between Africa's top two economies. The president said that they regretted the violence that occurred and pledged to deepen trade ties. In September, mobs armed with makeshift weapons attacked businesses and homes owned by foreigners, leading to at least 10 deaths, dozens of injuries, and up to 400 arrests. In response, Nigeria repatriated around 600 of its citizens living in South Africa.
We have expressed our deep regret at the events of the past few weeks that manifested themselves through attacks that were directed at foreign nationals.
Our two countries have also agreed to unequivocally address the challenges in our relations, including recent people-to-people challenges that saw attacks against foreign nationals, including Nigerians and their properties, which we strongly condemned. We have decided to work and take concrete measures together to prevent the reoccurrence of such unacceptable incidents in the future.
In Nigeria, the army has released 25 children after clearing them of suspected ties with armed Islamist group Boko Haram. Nigeria has fought an insurgency by Boko Haram that has killed more than 30,000 people over the past decade. According to UNICEF, 23 boys and 2 girls were handed over to authorities in Borno, the state worst affected by the insurgency. The children would be given access to medical support, education, and vocational training.
I'm delighted to welcome you all to another
occasion of handing over of children encountered by the military in counter-insurgency operations to civil authorities for proper administration. This is part of the holistic approach that takes into account the development and well-being of innocent children who are coerced into acts of terrorism, violence without moral justification.
The two-day Somalia Partnership Forum has come to an end in Mogadishu with a resolution to expedite the country's recovery and peace building. Representatives from 50 countries attended the forum, which started on Tuesday. The event focused on the country's recent developments and the challenges that lie ahead as the country rebuilds after decades of armed conflict and climate-related concerns. The recovery plan will be implemented in the next 12 to 15 months with support of the United Nations envoy to the East African country. Coming up after the break, Typhoon Mitag has made landfall in South Korea, killing at least 6 people. Stay with us.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. At least 6 people have died in South Korea as Typhoon Mitag made landfall on the south coast before tracking through half of the country. According to authorities, the death toll is expected to rise as search and recovery efforts continue. Landslides were also reported in other parts of the country. So far, more than 100 houses have been damaged, with power cuts experienced in some areas. The death toll in Iraq has climbed to 27, while over 600 were wounded during protests in various cities against unemployment, corruption, and poor public services. Iraqis flooded the streets for a third day of mass demonstrations in the biggest challenge yet to Prime Minister Abdel Mahdi. The police forces opened fire on protesters and repressed the demonstration with tear gas. The spokesperson for the Interior Ministry said that a child died on Wednesday when a protester threw a bottle of gasoline against a vehicle in Baghdad. Another child was killed in the southern city of Imara, and a further protester died because of injuries received on Tuesday. The Iraqi Prime Minister has declared a curfew in Baghdad after a second-day protest and police repression. The restrictions will remain in place until further notice. Curfews had already been declared in 3 other cities.
Despite the curfew, we are going out to protest, to call for our rights. We want to change the regime. They have arrested our people. They have done things to our people they did not even do to Daesh. They have beat them up and humiliated them while firing live ammunition. What did we do? Are we suicide bombers? We are here to call for our rights.
The German Chancellor declared this Wednesday that her country expects an organized exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union. However, she said preparations have been made should no withdrawal agreement be reached.
Of course, we've talked about the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union, specifically the fact that we still want a solution along with an agreement, an organized exit from the United Kingdom, but both nations have prepared for a contradictory scenario.
Employees fired by the Thomas Cook airline in the United Kingdom protested alongside Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn to demand answers about the company's dissolution. The workers marched on Parliament to deliver a letter calling for an investigation to be opened into the business failure. They also said that Thomas Cook must pay them the wages they're owed. Thomas Cook stopped operations on September 23rd after declaring bankruptcy.
I'm 2 years away from retirement, so I won't be able to get another job flying. It just won't happen for me. I'm part-time. Part-time positions are not available when you go to a new airline, so that won't happen.
This Wednesday in France, thousands of police marched against President Emmanuel Macron's government due to the wave of police suicides and deplorable working conditions. Thousands of French police officers rallied together in Paris for a march of anger, decrying poor working conditions and anti-police hostility, which many of them say is on the rise. In the first police strike in France since 2001, demonstrators marched from Bastille Square to Republic Square in response to growing anti-police sentiment linked to Yellow Vest protests, a wave of suicides, and proposed pension reforms.
We're a bit like the Yellow Vests of the police. We're both demanding greater purchasing power, better working conditions, a proper retirement plan, to be able to retire in good conditions and in good health. So yes, at its root, we had a lot of things in common with the Yellow Vests when they started their movement.
After the protest, I hope there will be a roundtable discussion to achieve concrete things, especially on the recuperation of extra hours, on which at the moment we get a couple dozen euros and are told, here you go, be happy with this. We are not happy with this, because every Saturday we have no families. We spend every weekend at Yellow Vest protests, and college no longer get to see their kids grow up.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.